Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the ThunderCast, your premier and only currently ongoing ThunderCat podcast. I have with me my co-host and friend, Mr. Tyler, the T-Rex Baker. Go ahead and say hi, Mr. Baker.
How are you, Thomas?
Doing all right, and I hope the rest of the audience is too. I'd like to go ahead and thank a couple of our sponsors today. We have Mr. Jeff Scott with comicbasics.com. A great website. Go ahead and check it out for all your comic book needs. And I'd also like to thank our Patreon supporter, Avis. Thank you again for supporting us and all that we do and all the madness. And hopefully you won't be at any point called into a courtroom over it. Today we have to discuss a couple of interesting things. We're going to go over the very first episode of ThunderCats. We're also going to discuss a couple of the Wildstorm comics. And we're going to go over a character retrospective of Pumyra in all of her forms. So with that getting said and out of the way, let's go ahead and start with the episode Exodus, the very first episode of ThunderCats. Mr. Tyler, what are your thoughts on this episode?
I didn't particularly like it as a kid. I thought it was actually kind of boring because to me as a kid, I had seen several episodes of ThunderCats that featured, various heroes and villains, and when I rented Exodus on VHS, it was both Exodus and the Unholy Alliance combined into one movie. Like there wasn't a break; it just played like one long episode, and I just thought it was so boring. I mean, aside from kind of being taken aback, I didn't make a big fuss like so many people like to love and overhype the idea that the Thundercats are naked. I mean. It was weird. I was like, that seems kind of odd, but not to the point that some people take it, where they want to drag it through the mud and all over the place and keep making jokes and remarks. I'm like, you know what? Do you watch the episode at all? It's a way of introducing the new looks and the weapons and everything like that to set up. That's what the whole show was. And I mean, who's to say that, we're talking about aliens from another planet. Why should they wear clothes? Why should they have nipples and, sexual body parts and stuff like that? I mean, I can get away. But I just feel like I'm so sick of that whole argument and people bitching and complaining about they're naked, they're weird. I'm like, shut the hell up, man. It's been done to death. And it's as an adult, I appreciate the episode so much more of setting it. I mean, it's a tightly packed episode.
Yes,
I mean, there's so much going on in that episode from the beginning to the destruction of Thundera, which is just kind of done so quickly. You'll see more about that throughout the series, but setting up if you want to watch this on syndication as a kid, and you didn't see the Unholy Alliance right away, I mean, it sets up the series and the ongoing struggle for the Eye of Thundera between the mutants and the ThunderCats, without even meeting the initial villain of the show too. So it's a solid episode by far.
All right, that's a very fair shake. I like how I got a little bit of a tangent out of that, which I do not, of course, disagree with. A lot of people do. They put too much focus on the assertion or belief that they're naked, which personally I don't think they are, because naked people don't tend to wear belts. But
well, yeah, it's every time it's like you can't mention, if people mention Exodus, it's all about dwelling on the fact that they're not wearing clothes, or people will slam ThunderCats because of that one episode that's gone and over with probably within the first 10 minutes or less.
Well, I think it's kind of funny that people are so focused on that, because what ThunderCats did in the first episode, you were talking about watching it on VHS, which I have myself, and on VHS it's unedited, because there are scenes in there that syndication, when it played on syndication, they didn't play for time restraints. But when you look at the episode as an adult, it is extremely violent.
Oh, absolutely.
And I say that because they're escaping a planet that's going to Bluey, and when the mutants attack, there's a scene edited out where they're all taking a defensive formation around the flagship, and when one of the mutants, I can't remember which one it was, talks about, well, aren't they armed? And Slide was talking about how they didn't have much in the way of armament because they saw that they were being filled with Thunderian refugees in their possession. So all those ships getting taken out was a whole bunch of Thunderians getting taken out at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's not something you saw on TV that often for children in the 80s.
No, and of course it's kind of a throwaway thing, but it's obviously implying all this death that took place on the show, and pretty ballsy. And you just have to think in the context too. When as an adult, you watch people die frequently in action movies and horror movies and dramas and stuff like that. But in the context of a children's TV show, it doesn't happen too often. So it is interesting to see that life, can be destroyed in certain cartoons, and this is there's no exception here.
What I really appreciated, one of the many things I appreciated from the first episode, is that entire space battle they show was very, very well done. It flowed very well, and honestly, it was just really neat to watch. It initially reminded me of stuff I had seen in Macross and Robotech. Watching it again as an adult, it's like I'm seeing all these different things that remind me of other things. It was really well done. Now, of course, the point of humor was the mutants. They had this advanced fighter ships that could fly in, do damage to these massive cargo ships. Of course, the mutants themselves in the cockpits were wearing nothing but underwear, and I still think that's hilarious, even an adult now. And that's always going to be a point I find humorous about even sometimes the ThunderCats is advanced technology, ancient races still use melee weapons.
But that's one of the charms about He-Man too,
right?
Is everybody doing the same thing? They're wearing loincloths and furry boots and kind of revealing outfits, but they're driving around in tanks and using laser and high tech technology. And ThunderCats is the same thing. I mean, you got the mutants are using mace, spiked clubs, and axes and primitive weapons, but they're flying around in what appears to be like a big dragonfly, aircraft, and
which was a great design.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a shame you didn't get to see more of that. I mean, obviously it crashes and gets sunk into the sand and risen up in the spaceship beneath the sands episode. But which
is also a lot of implied death too, because the mutant warship, it was filled with other mutants.
Yeah, and
I just think it like too bad.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess you could assume that they were all on the ship when it crashed, and of course Monkey and Slide and Jackalman come out, and yeah, I guess that would be the case. Is that, and I've often wondered. I mean, as a kid, I thought it was so cool that there were Jackal men and reptile men and Monkeyians, but you never saw much of you just in the opening sequence. But I always thought it was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But I never thought about that till you just said it. That when Pumyra sinks that ship, you pretty much have to assume all the rest of their race is still, on that ship when it sinks in the sand. And I mean, I assume that they all died.
I mean, we see a few of them here and there, but like by the time the series is winding down, you see very few of the random standard mutants. I'd imagine that it's a good plot device to explain why there's not many people on Third Earth helping the mutants, because most of them are dead, and whatever is left is back on Plundar doing whatever is happening on Plundar, because we literally never see we never see that planet at the entirety of all of ThunderCats, never once.
No, and that'd have been an interesting thing to see at some point. But another thing, I mean, you could clearly buy that, it's just they were just kind of written out of the stories. Like, we don't have time to keep showing reptile men and jackal men and Monkeyians running around. Let's just focus on our core three mutants and throw in a Voltron or Rataro on occasion here, And,
yep, not in the budget.
Not in the budget, pretty much. It was ambitious to see 3 races of these 3 villains running around, and would have been pretty cool, but you just clearly can't. Just have to take it in the opening credit sequence, and that's really about it.
Absolutely. But one of the things that a lot of people, even ThunderCat fans, miss is because the Sword of Omens is such a iconic thing, not just for the series itself, but even in universe, that a lot of people just assume that all the Thunderians knew about the weapon and were aware of what it was capable of. But the opening episode, Exodus, makes it very clear when you watch the uncut version that weapon, up until that point for the rest of Thundera, they didn't know it was a thing. They thought it was a myth, a legend, like Tigra said. And Jaga just throws it on the ship. It's like, yo, Lion-O, here's this ancient weapon that everybody thought was not real. Guess what? It is. Happy birthday.
Which, it helps build up the great, I was going to say the great, not myth, but it enhances this prized possession that, even though the mutants would eventually get a hold of it at some point, but they can't use it.
Yeah, and it makes sense.
Even when they did get a hold of it, like, it doesn't work with evil. Mom Ra wants it, but even if you had it, you can't use it. But it helps build up that, what this series is going to be about, that this is extraordinary. It's the equivalent of the Force. That this is the most powerful object in this TV series, and this is what everybody's going to be fighting over is this sword. And if you have it, you can rule the universe, essentially. And it spoils it when the mutants do get a hold of it on occasion, like the episode in the mountain, and you realize that
it does. But at the same time, it makes sense. And the reason why it makes sense is, the other ThunderCats aren't aware of what the sword's fully capable of. Even older ones like Tiger and Panthro, because to them it was a myth. So even if the ThunderCats themselves weren't aware of what the weapon's capable of, the mutants, of course, are certainly not going to know. So they just see, oh, this thing could be powerful. They don't know about all the nuances on how you have to use it. So because the mutants, as much as I hate to say it, they're dumb as bricks, their automatic assumption is I can use this thing without thinking, I wonder what could possibly be a negative side effect here.
Which, Jacqueline does hold on to it for a while. We're getting sidetracked, but it can be used as a weapon, but it does, the Sword of Omens is a life of its own, or has a life of its own, and it obviously turns on the person that's possessing it.
Mm-hmm.
It knows if it's good or evil. So it's in this episode, Exodus. They show that Lion-O questions, how am I going to know? How am I going to know how to use this thing? How is it going to, alert me of dangers? Like the sword will tell you, like, you'll know. And it's just a cool. It's an exposition episode. It has action in it, but it does everything, lets you know everything. If you're new to this series, you have to watch Exodus. You have to get past the I guess would be uncomfortable for some people, the nude factor. Once you get through that, you get everything you need to know about this whole show. Good and evil. What are they fighting over? Let's go.
Absolutely. But moving on, it's, we also have one of the biggest controversies within the ThunderCats fandom with this episode. And it's something I'm sure you're familiar with, and I actually did an entire video on my channel about Lion-O and his sped up birth issue or sped up aging issue due to the suspension capsule.
And I just take it simply as, look, when they wrote this, it was written for kids. They can get away with continuity errors. They make a point of saying, obviously they didn't want to drag out Lion-O being a kid for any more than they had to. So let's just write a quick explanation to justify him being a boy, and now he's an adult. You could probably get away with saying that Tiger and Panther may have aged 10, 15 years and probably don't look, they take care of themselves. They age well. But people are going to say, what about Wile E. Kid and Wile E. Cat? I'm like, all right, now you're getting to the point where you're digging too much into this. Lion-O is going to be the hero of this show. It's no more than just call it a writer's goof, and that's it. There's nothing to dig around. There's nothing to unbury or uncover. There's no, if you take the medallion and you shine it in the sunlight at a certain part, it's going to mark the exact spot and location of the real reason why Wile E. Kid and Wile E. Cat didn't age and Lion-O did.
Well, the funny thing is, and again, I have to go back to this book because it's always so informative. And if I ever get a reprint, I'm grabbing you a copy of it. But hear the roar, because they interviewed the writers. What you said is literally the hammer on the nail. The writing team said, all right, we don't want this guy running around with a sword as a kid for several reasons, one of which is that's boring. The second thing is we really don't want that liability. So we're going to age him up. Well, what about the others? Whoops. Well, they wound up retconning it later in the Wildstorm source book comics to say that the suspension capsule malfunctioned. But that was a fan-held assumption long before it was retconned. But it was never made official until then. So, unfortunately, as much as I do like tearing into fiction, and I do, sometimes people just tear in the wrong direction and get really frustrated when they're just told, we did not think of that. We did not care. It was
not to mention, too, it has nothing to do with the rest of the show. It's just a simple writing goof and nothing more. You're going to let this destroy watching episodes like Spitting Image and just drawing a blank here. Various episodes. So I was ever going to say Safari Joe, I mean, the Ghost Warrior, ThunderCats Ho, and Pumyra Lives, and I mean,
Rises to the challenge.
I mean, everything. I mean, there's so many great episodes, and you can sit there and be taken out because I can't get past the first episode, man. I can't figure out why Lion-O aged and why the Kitten Cat didn't, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, all right, well, let's give you, a diploma for being, a PhD in douchebagger, because I'm like, you know what, you're not proving anything here. They're we start doing this, then it's like, why even bother watching 80s cartoons? We start looking for logic and all this stuff.
Absolutely, and to a point, I can understand why we tend to expect
to a certain extent, but that someone who wants to tear this idea apart about this whole confusion over Lion-O aging, then you know what? Then you can't enjoy superheroes. You can't read comic books, because the simplest thing of people not being able to figure out who the hell Spider-Man, Superman, and Batman are, because they can't notice Batman's jawline or the glasses Clark Kent, Superman, and Spider-Man and Peter Parker, always seem to just kind of never be there at the same time. I'm like, it's the suspension of disbelief you have to indulge yourself in here. You can't go around and start nitpicking this stuff. Otherwise, then we wouldn't have great mythology of superheroes and great kick-ass action heroes of the 80s.
Yeah, and we could even go even further back. Like, if you're going to be that anal about it, you can't even enjoy some of the classics like most of Arthurian lore. So there is some that you have to dig into, because I do it in a different manner. I'll dig into it like through the book. I'll dig into it like, well, what were they thinking? Why were they doing this? Why did they make this decision? I go to the sources and I try to figure out why this decision was made. I don't try to find necessarily in-universe reasons for how or why, because at that point you're just beating your head against the wall, not realizing these people just had lives.
Yeah, and it's not just give me the rules you're starting with. Now, then I expect you to stick to that. So I mean, it's like same thing with professional wrestling. You know how it works, but I expect you to operate in the confines of the rules that are set up. When you start breaking those left and right, and it doesn't matter, we got to get this guy over, well, we're going to break that rule. Then you start pulling your hair out, because I know it's fake. And that's not what I'm arguing. I'm arguing that you're not sticking to the rules and the ideas that you set forth when you started out with this.
Because doggone it, we are civilized men.
Yes. Now, when you say a no blood match, I mean, in the match when it says no blood, don't take a chair shot over the head, he bleeds accidentally, and keep going because, well, we haven't reached the right time limit here and they screwed the finish us, so keep going until we get it right.
But yeah, that was Exodus. I recommend watching it if you can. For anybody who's listening, if you can, there's two options you have. You can watch it, of course, on DVD or iTunes, but if you can, on YouTube, it actually has for the old ThunderCats Slayer website, before it became thundercats.org, I think it is now, or thundercats.net. I can't remember what it is now.
I think it's thundercats.org.
Yeah, I think it's .org as well. But if you look that up on YouTube, they have all the edited clips that you can watch and figure out where the scenes were after you watch it, and you can get a better understanding of what they wanted in the story. And there's a reason why they did that. They actually wanted a story beyond just selling kids' toys, and of course everybody wanted to do that at some point, but they were trying to establish a little bit higher stakes, and I think they did very well on it. So if you're looking for a good starting point, I recommend Exodus. I recommend the unedited version. If you get really lucky, snag that VHS off of eBay if you can, like I did. I got mine for like $10 years ago.
It's hard to find like a good quality, because I want a nice box, preferably like the real big box that a lot of those VHS tapes came in, not the real small. Yeah, well, not the clamshell, but it's a much enlarged version of a standard slit VHS case.
Oh,
like
okay.
Much bigger, like a lot of the
like Blockbusters.
Well, no. It's actually bigger than that, because like Ghostbusters was released through Magic Window, and they came in those white clamshell cases. But G.I. Joe, Transformers, and ThunderCats were released from FHE, and a lot of those original first few releases came in these really big VHS boxes. I mean, if you go and look up G.I. Joe and Transformers and ThunderCats, you'll see different sizes. Sometimes you'll see a much smaller one that's just the exact size of the tape, and the ones that engulfs the VHS tape. And it just looks so cool. You see those in the videos, like, wow, it's a big VHS box.
It's like I need that.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I think I don't think I tried to buy the Ghost Warrior on VHS, thinking I was getting the real big box, but I didn't get in like the standard slipcase. But I don't have an example that I could post or show because those are. I just like those because they're just so big.
Well, if I can find them, I'll throw them up on the screen, but I can't make any promises.
Yeah.
We're going to go ahead and we're going to take a real quick 5-minute break, and then we're going to dig into some of the comics.
Cool.
All right. So
looks like 86% control loss in left rudder.
Tsunami will return in a moment with the ThunderCats.
Can we talk them in safely? Look, there it is! Wily Cat, these spaceboards are fun! ThunderCats!
All right, we're back from our short break. We're going to go ahead and talk now about some Wildstorm ThunderCats comics, specifically some of the more origin-based comics with ThunderCats Heroes and Villains, I believe it was, that had 3 individual stories in it. It was released in 2002, I believe, and they were written to fill in gaps of continuity within the original ThunderCats series, and this specific comic we're covering fills in the gaps with Grun and Jaga, fills in Claudus's anointment trial, Claudus being the Lionos' father, and has the origin of Pumyra in it, as well as how Cheetara became a ThunderCat. So, Tyler, as always, I will ask you to go first and tell me your thoughts about that comic book.
Didn't really enjoy it a whole lot when I got it. Like, it wasn't awful by any means, but it just, I think the biggest thing for me is I like not knowing Pumyra's origin. Like, I just felt like I loved the idea that this guy has been on this planet for more time than we could ever comprehend. You know, that he's an evil that's just observing and will attack when it's beneficial to him, and does answer to these ancient spirits of evil. But I just felt like, I mean, obviously he is a mummified character. He does live in a black pyramid, but I felt like the idea of making him a direct descendant of an Egyptian culture on which I guess if you go in the cartoon could have been First Earth. Don't know. Or is this all taking place on Third Earth?
First Earth, I think is a time period, whereas Third Earth is the physical planet itself.
Okay. Well, I just felt like it wasn't bad. I mean, there's certainly origin stories that are really offensive. This wasn't offensive. I just felt like it was unnecessary. And I know that with so many of these characters, they didn't give you a whole lot of, and that's what the point of this is. But Pumyra, I just felt like this is, because when you humanize him, I always feel like he's a character that wouldn't be human at all.
Yeah, this eldritch demonic horror that you don't really want to empathize with. I can understand that.
Yeah, and when you meet him as this advisor to Pharaoh, and he's human, just kind of, just I guess you could say he's not a handsome man. We'll just put it that way.
No,
and definitely he's supposed to resemble the Pumyra that you see with human features, not decrepit, kind of decayed form. But it just kind of felt like, and then he has a dog named Ma Tep instead of Ma Mutt, and I felt like I think you're kind of pushing the connections a little too much here.
Yeah,
but
at some point you had to say, you know what, he had to strike a deal for his dog now too. So
yeah, and it's just kind of feel like I don't because when you see Ma Tep, he looks like a very friendly, lovable puppy, not what you come to know from Ma Mutt, this demonic bulldog,
the hellhound.
Hellhound that big tongue and just probably drools excessively and can float in midair and take on Lion-O and stuff like that. But it's still not bad. It's kind of one of those stories where you can kind of take it or leave it. I don't look to that. I still kind of like the idea of it's an unsolved mystery, so to speak. But it's still not bad. Not bad.
What about the Cheetara story in there? How do you feel about that?
It was fun. That was a fine story. I mean, I kind of always saw Cheetara is a pretty strong woman altogether. It was kind of hard to picture her as being someone who's bullied or insecure. I kind of found that hard to believe. Like, that character trait to me just does not fit her. When you see in the cartoon, the woman is is as strong-willed as it gets. Especially in a show that's targeted towards boys, she hangs with the boys. She's not a damsel in distress at all. She's going around kicking people's ass all the time. So when you see her in this, I mean, obviously, I guess people can change. You want to see her growth, but it just was. It was interesting to see how she automatically got her spot as a Thundercat for saving young Lion-O from something that she could see with her sixth sense, and won a race that was had a whole lot of purpose. And you see various other races or ethnicities of Thundercat females and stuff like that partake in this particular race. But it's a fine story. That was perfectly fine.
All right, and we got, I think, a couple more stories in here. What do you think about Claudius's anointment trial?
I mean, that was fine too. I've never had an attachment to the other, I guess, like the father figures or the elder figures of He-Man and Thundercats. Like I've always been more focused on Lion-O and He-Man. Like I accept the fact, Lion-O had a father named Claudius, and was a very prestigious member of the Thundercats. And He-Man's father was King Randor, a very noble king and a great warrior in his time. But I felt like digging into their backstories is not something I'm like, that's not something I really clamor for. But however, the story was done quite well, where Claudius, kills his own father. Correct?
Yes.
Yes, because his father, which is an interesting take, in a sense that it's not the cliche,
evil uncle
or younger brother who's a spoiled brat. No, it's your father who's felt that Claus's grandfather was weak. He was a nice guy. I'm not. We need someone who's
going to expand the empire and.
Yeah, and it's I mean it's perfectly fine too. Like I said, there's certain things I wouldn't mind to see expanded upon, but however, these are. Let me just emphasize that for people who have not read these or do like them, I'm not saying none of these are bad at all, because none of them are. I've seen so many more worse origin stories or ideas thrown at He-Man and other properties. These are, when I read both books, I found them to be both perfectly fine. I didn't find them to be like, I can't buy that. I can't buy that at all. I'm probably nitpicking more than I probably should be, because really they're all fine stories. Like none of these were eye rollers or you're like, oh, this is garbage, But it was fine too. I mean, to give you a little bit of an extra backstory to Claudius is fine.
Now, I will say I did make a small mistake because I kind of got both books jumbled up because I read them both recently.
I did not want to question you on that. I thought, did I miss something here?
I missed something. It's not Grun and Jaga. It is.
Yeah, because that was in a separate book. I was like, I'm about 120% sure. But even when I know something that I think somebody may have mistaken, I'm just not inclined to come out and challenge them so much. I
made that mistake. That's my fault because, again, I read both books. There's Origins, Heroes, and Villains, which is what we're discussing, and there's Origins, Villains, and Heroes, which I wish they would have just done Origins Part 1 and 2, and it just makes – never mind. But the final story within Heroes and Villains is actually the formation and history of Thundera itself, as well as
that I was like, okay, if I had to pick apart, then I'm like, I don't want to see this. I just don't like this idea of explaining everything to death. That's my one big complaint is like this. Don't like this. Don't care for this.
Yeah, my thoughts on this are this. For the first story, we have Pumyra, apparently an Egyptian Sem priest or Coptic priest, named Wahanka, which I've never done research on. I wish I could to find out what that name may very well mean, if it means anything. But my problem with that story is, I like the idea of Pumyra being this ethereal, evil, demonic entity or devil priest, as he's called in the series. I don't mind an origin story for him, but what was his motivation? Just, I want your power. That's for a character that evil, who's literally alive because of the evil in the world. I'd like something a little more sinister than your stereotypical I want power story. So the art was fantastic. It was very well done. I liked the design.
Oh yeah, the art was good in all the stories. I mean, there wasn't any ugly art at all.
I'm going to disagree on one thing, but I'll get to that shortly. But that's just, of course, my personal opinion. But I like that the ancient spirits are shown as being, they're tricksters, and they're very evil, and they're very sinister, and they're in their own way. I like the idea of Mumra being tricked by them into building a pyramid as sort of extra servitude because, again, they're evil. I expect evil things from evil characters. But I'm more inclined to your viewpoint of he doesn't have to have one. I'd like it if he did. And I'd like him to be more motivated than I want to be the Pharaoh. Because that's, for Mumra, that's very small-minded. But, you know,
plus Mumra is portrayed as a very competent villain. Like,
yes.
Very intelligent. This guy comes off as a bit of a slow-mo. You know, because his plan fails so miserably, so quick.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I guess you could say...
You didn't think that through there, buddy.
No, and, I mean, you could say it's okay. He learned from this mistake, and throughout his time building the Black Pyramid and building the statues to honor the ancient spirits of evil, he got a lot smarter. His intelligence went through the roof. He developed an incredible sense of cunning and patience, because Mumra is not a villain who acts haphazardly. He's very smart. He calculates, he plans, he plots, he observes, and you kind of don't get that vibe from his, I guess you can call it, his humble beginnings, you know, as a priest. But if you play him up like it's a facade, like he's pretending to be this, which you kind of get the vibe that he didn't start out like that he, comes under the service of Pharaoh and just gets fed up with the job, and once is like, you know what, I could see things doing differently, and it's a gradual growing process of like desiring power, because the guy he's working with doesn't know what he's doing in his eyes. He may make bad decisions, and like, if I was doing this, I'd roll with an iron fist. This guy's too nice, or whatever the case may be. But I'd like to think that a lot of evil characters are just, they're born bad to begin with. I don't want to see them as kids, that they torture animals and stuff like that. But I just like to think that when you meet this character, they're very selfish. They're over ambitious, even for their own good, and they'll stop at nothing to get what they want. But it is an insatiable hunger for, I want that beautiful woman as my bride. Now that I've got her, I want that one, and I want that guy's fortune. Oh, that guy's got a bigger. I want that one. Like, it's unexplainable. They just want more and more, and they'll do anything to get it. They'll cheat people. They'll kill people. But one thing I like about Mumra, and I think I said this on another, maybe it was on an episode of Fans of Power, he does compromise, and he will work with you if you give him
screw you over immediately.
I always think of this episode, Spitting Image.
Yeah.
When he summons the driller, and he tells the driller, like, look, I will give you payment right now. I will give you more if you successfully bring me payment. But if you don't succeed at all, I'm taking my payment back that I gave. The down payment I gave you comes back to me. If you succeed, I will give you more. Like, he's giving him a deposit,
mm-hmm.
and he follows through with it. Like, I like that, because it means he's, okay, I can call him the driller again if I need another task taken, because I know I can depend on this guy, and he works for diamonds.
He manages well. He knows how to get the driller to do a job. He knows how to get the mutants to do a job. He also knows who's expendable. I
like that. Like, he, or like in the first episode, ThunderCats Hope, when he goes and summons the Berserkers to capture the Thunderians, first thing he's like, I'll give you my goodwill. And it's like, no, we hate goodwill. We work for gold. It's like, very well, you'll have gold. And he gives it to him.
That was one of the moments that Mumra honestly made me laugh. What's in it for us? My goodwill.
Yeah, it's like, maybe these guys are idiots. I can probably get away with just showing up as an apparition, tell them to do what I tell them to do.
Points for trying, but Vikings work for gold.
Yeah, and it's like, very well. Like, it's just, it's not dwelled upon, but it's just that great writing and character trait that gives him a little bit more personality as a villain.
I agree. And with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next part of the comic, which is, of course, you find out Chitara became a ThunderCat. And honestly, in my opinion, next to the origin story for the ThunderCats becoming a clan later on, this is my personal low point for the origin series because first of all, I hate the art, and I hate the art because it's very obvious to me as an artist that this artist is not used to drawing women at all.
I kind of almost felt like the guy was trying to mimic Michael Turner's art style.
It seems like that, but more importantly, Michael Turner has a tendency, or had, unfortunately, he passed away.
Yeah.
He had the tendency of giving everybody same face, but this person everybody has man face. And I'm fairly certain that because of Chitara's build, even in the series, Chitara is built like an Olympic sprinter.
Yeah.
This Chitara is built like Jessica Rabbit.
Yeah, she's curvy and quite shapely.
But it's not even in a shapely way that's an attractive woman. It's like, I think that the Men in Black are missing one of their coffee monsters in the back room. But the other thing that, of course, because I'm into swords, that irritates me, and, Jaga and Lino have a cameo in this. It's one of the main focal points later on. You never train a blade using a sharp blade if you're teaching anyone the basics. And here we have Jaga, the wisest member of the ThunderCats, using a live steel weapon to train Lino in swordsmanship on top of a cliff. This is something that Jaga would have enough intelligence to not do to begin with.
Well, maybe it's showing that Jaga trains people balls to the wall, man. He wants Lino to have balls big enough to come in a dump truck the minute he goes into battle.
If you can dodge a car, you can dodge a ball.
Exactly. So,
but that's just my personal viewpoint of that series. But my favorite story here, and the strong point, in my opinion, is Cloudus's anointment trial, and there's a couple reasons why. First of all, because Cloudus, the man, clearly was very confident in himself. And even the guardian of the Book of Omens that he's talking to is telling him that that's kind of the downfall of your people. Don't let it undo you. I like the evil father story. I like the political reason for it, because it's not saying, well, he wants riches. He wants to extend Thundera's empire. He wants to be a conqueror. He wants to take over these other places. And he's not doing it specifically because, he may have goodwill. And oddly enough, this actually kind of ties into Groon in the next comic.
Yeah, it's a lot like Groon.
Exactly. And I actually do like the art. I don't tend to like manga-style art with American comics.
I don't either, but
it was
certain times it's appropriate, and this was pretty appropriate, I thought.
And I kind of like how they gave him a different hairstyle than Lionel had, or even that he had when he became older. You can tell this is, of course, young Cloudus, and you can tell by his personality. It's kind of interesting that this is supposed to be in canon with the cartoon, and older Cloudus, he was wiser, he was less interested in action as opposed to trying to figure things out in other ways. But I like that you could tell that at some point he grew into that. But there is one thing about this comic, one singular thing about this in a specific story I do not like. And the only reason why I don't like it is because it breaks continuity, and that's the fact that Cloudus uses the Sword of Omens during this trial.
I can forgive something like that.
I can forgive it, but that's just the only one of the only two things I didn't like. The only other thing I don't like, and that's just because I'm kind of picky as an artist, is like the final panel they show Cloudus's face. They completely forgot to color part of it in. But the story was very well written. The what's the word I'm looking for? The choreography for the fight, it's very well done. It's very easy to follow, and it makes sense. A lot of people who do choreography or sword fights in comics or TV, they just make no sense. But this makes very good sense. It's the most solid story in this book, by my opinion.
And the way the final blow is illustrated is very cool.
Yes.
Or they're facing face to face. You pull back, and the Sword of Omens has been plunged into his father. And
couldn't have happened to a better guy.
Yeah, and it's like we've seen it in movies, but it looks cool, and it looks cool here.
And again, the Sword of Omens can't be used for evil, so he kind of had it coming, obviously.
Oh yeah, I'm sure the Eye of Thunder is like, you know what, the hell with this guy, man. Put an end to this.
Like, nope, we are noping out of this. And for the final story with the birth of Thundera as a people and the ThunderCats, I don't mind it so much I think it went into too much detail. I don't need to see, well, they evolved from primitive animals. It's like, no, I don't need this.
Well, then that's why I've never, ever liked the idea where, to me, Thunderans are humanoids who have
features.
cat-like features. Like, when I say cat-like features, means their skin color resembles one of the many cats. Their faces are human-looking. To say that at some point cheetahs and lions and panthers started walking on two legs, and at some point their faces got flatter and flatter and flatter, and they started mating with cavemen or something like that.
Ugh.
It doesn't make sense, and that's why I always hated the Dogs of War miniseries that they did, where I'm like, the ThunderCats are humans that have cat. The Lion-O, it doesn't look like a lion, but he's the leader, like King, Lord of the ThunderCats, King of the Jungle kind of thing. Panthro doesn't really look like a panther.
No,
Chitara has the spots. Tigra has the stripes. But that's about it. There's nothing, tiger-like about Tiger. There's nothing cheetah-like about Chitara. Same thing with Panthro. And when you get something like Dogs of War, where the mighty Dobra Lord. And it's a dog walking on two legs, holding his cape triumphantly. I'm like, you people are missing the point here. Just because they're Thunder Cats, no one else, like Bengali, Lynxo, and Pumyra, do not resemble any of those cats. No Bengal, no Lynxes, and no Pumas. They look nothing like that. It's just using the variety of cats to give this character a name. That's it.
I mean, they have features of the big cats they're named after. I'll say that much. But the ThunderCats have always been
not to the extent that when you see a panther, I can see why Panthro looks like panther.
Not at all. But the thing about that is, I like the way that Bob did the character designs because they look more human than they do cat-like, which is how I prefer it. Because after we don't.
Oh, I do too. I'm so glad.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times when they expand the world of Third Earth or Thundera, that everybody's supposed to look like an animal. I'm like, no.
They can be whatever they want. It's a fictional world. Do it up.
Oh, yeah, okay. All right, fine. But I just kind of feel like if you're saying they came from Thundera, it's the home of the ThunderCats. The mutants come from Plundar. You can make them whatever they want on that planet. But what we're saying here is like the people on the planet Earth. We all resemble humans. Aside from the animals that inhabit this planet, we have different skin types, different facial features, yet we're all humans. We all come from the same planet. The people on Thundera should essentially look pretty similar.
Yeah.
With,
some different features.
Different skin colors.
And I'll agree, but what I did like about this story, and I wish they would have cut out the rest of the fluff, because when they get to the meat of it, talking about how the ThunderCats were formed, and I kind of like how it was started by a saber-tooth clansman, because that ties in not only to Groon, but it just makes sense, like timeline-wise, because by the time the saber-tooth was, gone here on Earth, we had the big cats, and I like how it sort of shadows that. And the one thing I do have a problem with is, doggone it, they gave him a complicated name.
I can't even remember it.
What is it?
See, and that's
Macherondance. It's like, really? I'm not saying that again.
No, and it doesn't help that I don't buy this whole, pre-Thundera storyline that they, it's just like, no, I don't need it.
Oh yeah, his name was Megatherion, which makes me think more Transformers than ThunderCats. But I enjoyed that aspect. I enjoy how it shows that it leads into other stories, and I'm fine with that. But I really could have gone without the in the beginning nonsense. I read that in Genesis. I don't need it in my comic books.
Well, it ties it into Exodus.
It does, and that's kind of neat. But at the same time, good God, we didn't need all that. I mean,
it's like we're tying it all into Bible terms. You got Genesis and you got Exodus.
Yeah, it's all fun and games till we get to Revelation.
There you go.
But we're going to go ahead and in the comic discussion, we're going to do a short character biop on Pumyra, because I know we're a little bit over the time initially stated for Tyler here, but I think we've been getting pretty good dialogue here back and forth. But Pumyra showed up, of course, in Season 2. She was introduced in the 5-part story. ThunderCats Ho is one of the new ThunderCats. But there are some things people may not know about her. With the exception of Wily Kit and Cat, she's actually the youngest ThunderCat according to the source material. And unfortunately,
I did not know that.
Yeah, most people don't. And I didn't even know that until I read it. And again, that's why if they ever do a reprint of this book, you're the first person on the list that's going to get a copy, because I think you're going to love this book.
Oh, I have no doubt that I will. No doubt.
But she was unfortunately in only 32 episodes of the entire series. And she is shown as being the softer, gentler one, whereas Chitara is the action girl that goes out there and whoops on everybody. Pumyra, she's more content to stay in the back and try to outthink the situation as opposed to run in and hit everything with a stick. But I enjoyed her characterization in the original series. I thought she was a fascinating character. I would have loved to see her develop more, but by the time we got to where we could do anything with her, Thundera had reformed, and everything was going insane, and probably due to budget reasons, voice acting, and all this. She kind of got left out of the main action, having to be kept on Third Earth with Tigra for most of the time.
Yeah, and and writing her in such a way too kind of prohibits a lot of the. I mean, she does partake in some certain action at times throughout various episodes, but like I said, for the most part, she kind of gets lost in the mix. And but I really didn't get to know her until I got the series on bootleg when I was in 11th grade in high school, and actually got to see Linkso, Bengali, and Pumyra for the first time in the cartoon, and I enjoyed all three of them, and I thought Pumyra was very attractive, and especially when you see her in the other Wildstorm books, and then and even in the reboot cartoon. Very attractive. Mm-hmm. I mean, I love how she's typically drawn as a very beautiful female character. To me, she is. But then again, too, when you see Wily Kit and ThunderCats: The Return, I'm like, dear God, man, Wily Kit is hot, man. So I'd be a toss-up between adult Wily Kit and Pumyra, but I'd probably go with Pumyra at the end of the day. If I was going to say, you know what, I'm going to date one of these female ThunderCats, and I'd be courting Pumyra probably. Unless Wily Kit was really pushing hard as an adult, I'm like, you know what, I'll go with you. But I love Pumyra. She was written competently. She was, and the good thing about ThunderCats is that the main female characters on the show were not written as whiny, female characters. They weren't written as the damsels in distress or the captain of PMS that Teela was in the He-Man cartoons, and they were fortunate to be treated consistently well. I mean, most females in the ThunderCat series in general, even though I can't stand her, Mandora and the Tree Maidens were all written as strong women. Absolutely. They didn't come off as
I said absolutely.
And I can appreciate that. And Pumyra was written, and I thought Wily Kit and Cat is childlike characters were written very well. Not obnoxious. They took such good care. A lot of some of the voices may not have been the best at times,
but none of the characters were just make you go whenever you saw them because your hair stood on end and didn't want to see them like that. I can't think of any character from ThunderCats like that.
No, I can't either.
And the only character to me that gets close to that might be Captain Bragg, but his crow saves him on that sense.
Okay,
I love Cronan.
We'll save that for a discussion on it further.
I like Cronan because it's got a pun in his name.
I'll let it ride until we get to that episode.
I'm a very simple man. But that's my vice. However, I agree that the women were written competently. They weren't stereotyped, and they weren't like hypersexualized either. I mean, while they may be appealing to look at because we're men and we like looking at things, that's a scientific fact. They didn't run around like half naked all the time, and they weren't put out there as just the girlfriend character. No, they were fully fledged characters in and of themselves, with or without anybody else around them.
Yeah, I mean, they took part in action. I mean, when you first see Pumyra in the first episode of ThunderCats, she's duking it out with the mutants when Bengali and Linkso or with the Robears are set up their little village on an island. They're engaging in combat when they're captured. She got her hands tied behind her back, and she's still fighting against the berserkers and the mutants still,
exactly.
And she consistently like that, and it's
something that unfortunately we're only seeing hit mainstream in terms of cartoons that have competently written females here in the past 10 years. And that's just a bit embarrassing, but, we were doing that back in the 80s, and we just stopped sometime in the 90s with the exception of just one or two.
Well, I guess they realized, too, that, I'm sure, excuse me. From the marketing standpoint, most companies knew that girl action figures in a boys' toy line just sit and collect dust, and then they become worth a whole lot when the toy line is canceled, and then everybody grows up and like, oh, man, I got to have that camera. I'm like, $800, man. What the hell are you talking about? Well, nobody wanted her. No, everybody does.
And more importantly, we have two action figures of Pumyra currently. We have the original LJN or Glasslight or whoever was the distributor at the time, depending on your location. And we, of course, had the Matty Collector version a few months ago, which personally I think is fantastic.
Oh, I was so thankful. Even though, we've been shortchanged, I still got high hopes that we'll get more of this one day, that we got Pumyra before we got Chitara. I'm like, oh, man. I was so thankful for that.
Right. And they're fantastic toys. Of course, unfortunately, the original Pumyra has some issues with her paint. Because, again, when people produce these toys back in the time, they had no clue that people would still have them 30, 35 years later. So they may not be made to last as well as we would hope. But we also have to do a bit of a retrospective on Pumyra and the newer series. And, again, I love her character design, and I think that the voice actress for her was fantastic. I can't recall the name, but it's the same voice actress that does Bobby Hill on King of the Hill.
She's passed away. No, wait. I'm thinking the girl that did
Luann.
No, I can't think of the girl who did Bobby's.
It was Pamela Adlon or Adlon.
Oh, gotcha.
Pamela Adlon. Yeah, she did the voice for Pumyra, and she was very good at it in the 2011 series. But so we don't go into spoiler territory. I don't really care what they did I don't really care for how they handled her character.
Yeah, I didn't make it that far, but I did find out what she did, and
yeah. You tapped out early.
Yeah, but like I said, I had no patience. I was so excited for that new ThunderCats cartoon, and I just got pissed off within the first 6, 7, 8 episodes. I made sure I was home at 7 o'clock on Friday night to watch it every week. And the pilot episode had me worried already.
Yeah,
and that's a story for another day. But
we will get into that later. But just wanted to give a good retrospective on Pumyra. And before we close out, do you have any recommendations for our viewers to watch other than Exodus and Unholy Alliance for next time?
I think I don't think I've recommended it on this podcast, but Spitting Image.
Oh, so great.
I saw that as a kid. I bought it on VHS, used it at a video store, and thought it was good, but not as good as I did when I was an adult.
And man, the art on the VHS box, it's great.
Yeah, very, very cool looking, especially with Mom-Ra's face. Like half of his face is shown behind the fire in the background, and it's a very good episode. Aside from Driller is portrayed very strong and competently, Mom-Ra is the evil mad scientist and creating an evil Panthro clone that's possessed by the dead spirit of Hammerhand, which doesn't make much sense because Hammerhand is alive. But I did not know that at the time. When I saw it, I thought, okay, maybe he's dead. I had no idea, but
I think it may have been aired out of order, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things. I'm not going to question it. It's ThunderCats, and it's just cool to see Hammerhand is possessing a ThunderCat clone of Panthro. But it's a great episode. It's a good Panthro centric episode, and ends very well. It's just it's a really well written story, and it's I'm not saying it's going to change your lives, but Spitting Image tends to be one of my frequent go-tos when I'm in the mood for ThunderCats. I'll pop in Spitting Image just because it's such a damn good episode. And that was an episode too that my brother, my younger brother, really got into because he really developed an affinity for the Driller. He just thought the Driller was really, really cool looking, and especially when he showed up in Jackalman's Rebellion, he just thought and that's another classic. You know, to get your Driller fix, you watch Spitting Image and watch Jackalman's Rebellion. I think it's called, was it Day of the Machines?
Yes, Day of the Machines was the
that's a stinker, not very good. And I think he appears in one other episode. I think it's 4 episodes total that the Driller appears in, but maybe it's just 3. Day of the Machine stinks. Avoid that one. It's not a good episode at all. But if you want to get your Driller fixed by watching Spitting Image, and if you want to counteract that, Jackalman's Rebellion, and I'll save that for a further recommendation on a later episode as to why that's such a good episode.
All right, so on the next podcast, we're going to cover Unholy Alliance, the second episode of ThunderCast. We're going We're going to cover...
Love that episode.
It's a great episode. But we're also going to cover the Wildstorm Villains to Heroes origin comic. And I wanted to say this is a bit of a surprise to you. But we're also going to, since we've been fluctuating from villain to hero, the villain we're going to cover for next time is going to be Groon.
Yeah, Jagger.
Jagger. Right? So I'm sure I'm going to hear tons of that during all this episode.
Yeah. Oh, man. We talking some Ghost Warrior for sure, man.
You're getting already excited. That's good because now that we're away from doing this podcast via comic or figure release.
Oh, my gosh. I swear it felt like it was a Vietnam waiting for that series to end. Even though we were only talking that comic once a month. I mean, doing it on here and doing it on Fans of Power, I'm like, it was just like
felt like Arnold and Predator. Like, kill me now, do it.
Yeah. Or I'm standing there. The rainforest has been destroyed. I'm sitting there covered in mud, and you and Joe come down the helicopter to come and get me. I'm like, I got nothing left, man. I can't say anything. Just look at me and think, what the hell happened to that guy? And then I throw this comic just happens to fall down on the floor, and then the Predator music cues as the helicopter flies away. Oh my gosh! Well, it really was. It was a pit of despair getting through it, and I'm so glad. And I didn't, I stopped by after issue 2, but to hear you and Joe talk about it just. Well,
let's not trouble you more with that. Let's go ahead and keep that past in the past.
Yes,
but we
dead and buried deeper than Mom Ra being dropped into a what I guess was a big black hole in this origin book. Deeper than that.
Yes, his onyx pyramid. But we're going to go ahead and close this on out. Thank you all for joining us. Again, hit up comicbasics.com. Support us on Patreon. Link will be in the description if you want more of these episodes of me and Joe and Mr. Tyler here getting our fan rage on or anything in general. And, of course, check out Fans of Power, the podcast that Joe and Tyler do, and they have a very special guest. This podcast is happening tomorrow as of the recording of this, which is happening Saturday night. I'm going to try to get it out Sunday morning. So the morning this comes out, that evening will be their next episode of Fans of Power, which they do live, by the way, for those who are interested for He-Man. And why don't you go ahead and tell them who you got coming on your show next time?
Yes, if you're listening to this, or you know what, if you're a ThunderCats fan and coming back to the mix and you enjoy He-Man, we'll be interviewing actor Anthony DeLonges, who played Blade in the live-action 87 movie and also had a great bar fight with Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse and taught Catwoman and Indiana Jones how to use a whip properly and fought David Carradine and the Warrior and the Sorceress. So he's a great career as a swordsman, but to me, he will always be the evil master of swords from the live-action movie. So we will be interviewing him on the next episode of Fans of Power, which will be airing 24 hours after we're currently, or less than 24 hours after we recorded this episode. So
there will be a direct link in the description of this video.
Absolutely, and I'm on Facebook. Anybody wants to tell me I'm stupid for thinking Pumyra is hot and Chitara is where it's at, Find me on Facebook. Let me know what you think. You know, if you think I'm completely wrong in that perspective, look me up on Facebook. I will duke it out with you or to have a friendly conversation about one of the greatest 80s cartoons that's ever been created.
For those of you who might want to, I'd recommend looking at the man's profile picture and choose based on that, on how you want to approach this man concerning this discussion. But
what are you trying to imply there?
That you're massive, and anybody who wants to pick a fight with you is probably retarded.
Well, then allow me to educate them in their retardation.
There we go. But thank you all for joining us. I hope to see you next time. And Tyler, any other closing words?
Well, how can I end this? I'll just quote an episode of ThunderCats. I'll need more diamonds to penetrate.
No more diamonds.
Unless you succeed, driller. On your way.
On your way. Good night, everybody.
Good night.